Welcome again to another episode of Selling Hobson by the Pound. This week we have a number of original copies or different variety of copies. Here's Led Zeppelin Physical Graffiti. And then here's 3 copies of Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. What these are what we call mastering comparison copies. These are copies from my own collection that we use to compare against the original tapes to decide what we should do in the mastering process. And there actually is some pretty interesting ones here. This Deja Vu is a Japanese copy, which I seem to remember sounded a little bright. And then here's an original copy, if I recall. Oh no, this is a British copy actually from Atlantic in Britain. And then here's the famed original master recordings, Mobile Fidelity copy from way back when. You'll notice something interesting that we didn't know or we didn't think about. Notice the difference in the color here. I don't know if you can see with the glare. Mobile Fidelity did not choose to go with the original, which kind of greenish gray cover, which these are. Instead going for what kind of was the second version of this leatherette cover. Anyway, very collectible records and my comparison copies that we used in mastering. Probably one of the last copies of the Rolling Thunder Review. This looks like it came out of as a play copy, sealed, beautiful condition. That's going to go for big money. Here's some interesting records. I talked to Chad Kassem the other day and I told him the story that I'd found these records and they're on Varese Sarabande, right? Which most people think of as a label that put out film music, which it did later on. And I always had there's a famous record called The Emerald Forest, a good audiophile favorite, by the way, that was on Varese Sarabande. But I went back and I came across these records, and these are reissues on Varese Sarabande from the 70s. And they're from the Remington catalog, which if you've ever seen Remington records, there's a couple of collectible ones, but they're all incredibly noisy. They were put out by the Gabor Company, who owned Remington Records back in the early 50s. Interesting recordings, mostly classical. George Enesco is the feature of this, and then Albert Spalding. This is one of the only recordings of Albert Spalding on tape. All the stuff before that was on 78 and so forth. But what's interesting is, if you read the liner notes here, they talk about going back to the original 30 IPS masters and cutting from the tapes and so forth. So, in fact, I think these guys predate all of the audiophile companies, including Mobile Fidelity and certainly Classic Records. So I thought it was very interesting that, and I write that original Remington recording of Albert Spalding, Varese audiophile reissue from original 30 IPS tapes, pressed at KM in Burbank, California. Dead quiet pressing reveals all the nuances of this fabulous mono recording. Amazing. Anyway, I thought you'd appreciate that. Now here's a label, Duker Thompson. And I pursued these records for the longest time, and I've still got quite a few of them. This is Jean-Pierre Ron Paul, and accompanied by a fellow on harpsichord. So it's flute and harpsichord music. But here's what's interesting about these records. They're really fabulous, but they're almost 200 grams. And they were pressed by Decca Records, I think, but they are London, so Decca really. But they're really interesting records, and they're super heavyweight records from the 1950s. So 200 gram was going on in the 1950s. Here's another Albina's Iberia, the complete suite for piano. Again, a beautiful Duker Thompson box. This thing looks like it's never been opened. I mean, I plays mint with extremely low surface noise. You'll not find a better copy of this set, I note. It's really shocking how beautiful this is from the early 50s. Here's an interesting series. I collected a lot of these. I don't have the whole thing, but it's from the so-called Decca Headline series, right? Basically avant-garde music. This is the one that everybody's after, The Plague, Gerhard the Plague, and it's conducted by Antal Dorati. But there's some other very, very interesting things here. This one I put, this is Decca, what is this, Head 3, I think. And I put very rare Decca Headline title, Avant-Garde Music, Amazing Sound. Of course, this is the Decca Tree. Those guys knew how to do recordings that sounded like they're in the room. And these are incredibly rare. I pursued them for years and years and years and collected all the ones that I could. So people that are interested in avant-garde, but really good sound, beautiful pressings, here you go. Don't pass these up. Is that another Head recording? No, this is an Argo, but a very famous, I say stunning Decca recording. This is one that I think Harry Pearson quite liked a lot, was probably on one of the super discs lists. It's Messiaen is the composer, and it's a series of different tone poems. Anyway, cool cover too. And then, I'm just going to point out that I've started digging into my very extensive original EMI collection, and I've got multiples of a lot of these things. They're just beautiful. So here's a number of things that Barbaroli conducted. Most of this is Delius, the music of Frederick Delius. Here's a Barbaroli recording. Here's Charles Groves conducting Delius. This is an interesting record. This is a very collectible record, but it's an audiophile reissue. I say audiophile reissue from the original master tapes at Abbey Road Studios in London, unplayed. So it's Tortelier playing Brahms' Double Concerto with Christian Ferras. Very nice copy. Here is an audiophile favorite, but it's a reissue from Alto High Fidelity from the original master tapes at Abbey Road. Very, very nice copy. This is a long-standing TAS Harry Pearson super disc list item, and I've got some originals. This might be coming up as well, but this is a beautiful copy that has never been opened. I had 3 or 4 unopened copies, and this looks like famous Shostakovich Baba Yar. Symphony number 13 with Previn and the London Symphony. Very well-known performance, and this is on that postage stamp label that everybody talks about. Very, very nice copy. So anyway, that is the listing for this week on Test Pressings, and I wish everybody luck.